The morning sun rises over Rome's greatest marketplace, casting golden light across the Forum Boarium, where the ancient stones echo with voices of merchants who have traded here since the city's founding. You find yourself standing among stalls overflowing with goods from every corner of the empire. Egyptian silk competing with Germanic amber, Gallic wine beside Spanish olive oil, as thousands of Romans begin their daily hunt for treasures and bargains that flow into the capital from across the known world. But what you're about to witness isn't just ordinary trading. It's the most elaborate con game ever attempted in the heart of Roman civilization. The marketplace stretches before you like a living map of Roman commerce, where senators' wives examine exotic spices while their slaves haggle over grain and pottery, creating a democratic chaos where money speaks louder than social status. Among this legitimate hustle and bustle moves a figure whose very presence seems to transform honest trading into something far more dangerous and exciting. Marcus Flavius navigates through the crowded aisles with the confident stride of someone who owns not just his space, but the attention of everyone around him. At 30 years old, Marcus has spent nearly half his life perfecting the art of reading human nature with surgical precision. His blonde hair catches the morning light as those sharp green eyes categorize every person he sees according to their potential value as marks, allies, or threats. 15 years of marketplace cons across the Mediterranean have taught him that successful fraud isn't about lying to people. It's about telling them exactly the lies they most want to believe. What makes Marcus truly dangerous isn't his individual skills, but his comprehensive understanding of Roman psychology and social dynamics. He knows that Romans pride themselves on being shrewd bargainers who can spot true value and detect inferior goods with eagle-eyed precision. This confidence in their own judgment becomes his greatest weapon, creating elaborate scenarios where his marks feel clever and superior while walking directly into his carefully prepared traps. You observe as he positions himself strategically near the temple of Mercury, patron deity of merchants, and, in a delicious irony that Marcus certainly appreciates, thieves and tricksters as well. The divine association lends credibility to his operations, while the temple's architecture provides multiple escape routes should his activities attract unwanted attention from the aediles who patrol the marketplace looking for exactly his type of illegal enterprise.
The masterpiece of deception begins when Marcus unveils his latest collection of ancient Egyptian treasures, jewelry and artifacts that he claims were recently discovered in a tomb near Memphis, acquired through exclusive connections with Egyptian priests who needed quick money to fund urgent temple repairs. The pieces are actually sophisticated forgeries created by skilled craftsmen in the Subura district. But their exotic appearance, combined with Marcus's passionate storytelling, transforms cheap metals and colored glass into priceless relics that supposedly adorned pharaohs and queens. "Citizens of Rome," Marcus calls out in the commanding voice that has separated hundreds of fools from their money over the years. "Fortune brings to our marketplace today treasures that have lain hidden beneath Egyptian sands for over a millennium. Each piece bears sacred symbols of gods older than our republic, crafted by master artisans whose secret techniques died with the dynasties they served." The crowd that gathers around his modest stall represents a perfect cross-section of Roman society. Wealthy matrons seeking unique jewelry for important social events, young soldiers hoping to find impressive gifts for their sweethearts, ambitious merchants looking for exotic goods they can resell at higher prices, and curious citizens drawn by the irresistible promise of actually touching genuine pieces of ancient history. Marcus studies each face carefully, his experienced eyes reading expressions, postures, and subtle reactions that tell him exactly how to tailor his approach for maximum impact. When a prosperous-looking woman shows particular interest in an elaborate golden necklace, he leans in conspiratorially and whispers that it was worn by the legendary Queen Nefertiti herself during her most sacred ceremonies, blessed personally by the high priests of Ra to grant eternal beauty and divine favor to whomever possesses it. For a grizzled veteran examining a bronze ring with obvious skepticism, Marcus spins an entirely different tale about protective powers that saved 3 different pharaohs from assassination attempts, claiming the magical properties grant supernatural courage in battle and ensure victory over all enemies. His genius lies not in memorizing prepared speeches, but in reading his audience's reactions in real time and building his narratives dynamically, incorporating specific details that resonate with each individual's particular desires, fears, and secret ambitions. But what Marcus doesn't realize as he weaves his web of beautiful lies is that he's being watched by someone whose powers of observation and deduction rival his considerable abilities. Julia Mercator stands at the edge of his growing audience, her intelligent brown eyes studying not the fake artifacts, but the man selling them with such passionate conviction and theatrical flair.
Julia's intervention comes at precisely the moment when Marcus believes he has his audience completely under his spell, ready to compete with each other for the privilege of owning pieces of genuine ancient Egyptian history. She steps forward with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what she's doing, and her first words send a chill through the warm morning air that has nothing to do with the weather. "These are beautiful reproductions," she says clearly enough for the entire crowd to hear, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of genuine expertise rather than idle skepticism or jealous competition. The craftsmanship is quite impressive, but I notice several details that seem inconsistent with authentic Egyptian work from the historical periods you've described. The murmur of uncertainty that ripples through Marcus's audience threatens to destroy hours of careful preparation and potentially lucrative sales. You watch as his confident demeanor flickers for just a moment before his natural charm and lightning-quick thinking reassert themselves, even as he rapidly assesses this unexpected threat and calculates his options for effective damage control. My lady clearly possesses refined taste and considerable knowledge of antiquities, Marcus responds with his most charming smile, never letting his voice betray the alarm bells ringing in his head. Such educated caution is truly admirable in these times, when inferior copies flood the market from dishonest dealers operating without proper expertise. Perhaps you'd be interested in examining these pieces more closely in private, where we can discuss their unique and documented provenance without distracting other customers who might not appreciate such scholarly discourse. But Julia isn't finished with her very public examination, and her next words demonstrate exactly why she represents such a dangerous threat to Marcus's carefully constructed deception. "I'd be delighted to discuss provenance and historical accuracy," she replies with a slight smile that suggests she's actually enjoying this confrontation more than she probably should. For instance, this particular necklace features a combination of hieroglyphic symbols that were never used together during the New Kingdom period you mentioned. And if you look closely at the metalwork,
you can see tool marks that are entirely consistent with modern Roman manufacturing techniques rather than ancient Egyptian methods. Her devastating analysis continues with surgical precision as she points out anachronistic design elements, alloy compositions that were unknown to ancient metalworkers, and construction techniques that clearly reveal the jewelry's recent origins in contemporary workshops. Each observation she makes is delivered with the calm authority of someone who has spent considerable time studying genuine artifacts, and her comprehensive knowledge proves sufficient to dismantle Marcus's entire elaborate narrative, piece by methodical piece.
Rather than attempting to salvage his current con through increasingly desperate lies that would only make the situation worse, Marcus makes the tactically sound decision to abandon his position while he still can do so with some dignity intact. "I'm afraid there seems to be some unfortunate confusion about the nature of my merchandise," he announces to the crowd with as much composure as he can manage under the circumstances. "Perhaps it would be better if I returned another day when market conditions might prove more favorable for serious collectors who truly appreciate historical authenticity." As Marcus begins packing his fake treasures with the efficient, practiced movements of someone who has made many similar hasty retreats over the years, Julia approaches him with an expression that combines amusement, professional respect, and something that might actually be genuine interest rather than simple triumph over a defeated opponent. "Please don't leave entirely on my account," she says quietly, her voice now carrying undertones that suggest this public confrontation might have served purposes far beyond simple fraud prevention or civic duty. "Your performance was genuinely impressive, even if your merchandise wasn't quite what you claimed it to be. I think you and I should have a more private conversation about certain mutual interests and potential opportunities." The discussion that follows takes place in a small, dimly lit tavern tucked away in the narrow streets directly behind the main marketplace, where the morning crowd of merchants conducting early business and dedicated drinkers starting their day early provides perfect acoustic cover for conversations that definitely couldn't occur in any public forum. Over cups of surprisingly good wine that Marcus gallantly insists on purchasing despite his recent financial disappointment, Julia reveals that her motivation for exposing his fraud wasn't righteous indignation or civic responsibility, but something far more complex and potentially profitable for both of them. "I've been observing your operations for several weeks now," she admits, with the refreshing directness that characterizes most successful Roman business people. "Your techniques are genuinely sophisticated, your theatrical presentation is absolutely flawless, and your intuitive understanding of customer psychology probably exceeds what most completely legitimate merchants achieve after decades in the trade. You're being completely wasted on these relatively small-scale individual cons when your considerable talents could be generating truly serious money with the right kinds of opportunities and proper institutional support." What Julia proposes over the next hour transforms Marcus's fundamental understanding of what organized fraud could become in the hands of truly ambitious and intelligent practitioners. Instead of continuing to target individual marks with essentially standalone deceptions that generate modest short-term profits, she envisions elaborate long-term schemes that could generate enough substantial wealth to set them both up comfortably for life, while operating at levels of institutional sophistication that would place them essentially beyond the reach of normal law enforcement methods. Her family's well-established legitimate trading business, Julia explains with growing enthusiasm, provides the absolutely perfect existing infrastructure for moving questionable goods, effectively laundering profits to established commercial channels, and most importantly, creating the kind of thoroughly credible background documentation that opens doors normally kept firmly closed to anyone with obvious criminal associations or suspicious financial histories. Furthermore, her carefully cultivated reputation for complete honesty and scrupulously fair dealing, built up methodically over many years of genuine commerce and satisfied customers, makes her the ideal front person for sophisticated operations that require genuine institutional trust rather than the simple individual gullibility that Marcus has been exploiting in his current small-scale marketplace activities. The really significant money isn't in fooling individual customers one at a time, Julia continues, clearly warming to her theme as she outlines her comprehensive vision of fraud as high art rather than merely opportunistic petty crime. The substantial profits come from systematically manipulating entire market segments, creating elaborate fictional opportunities that attract major investment from wealthy people who really should know better, establishing completely fake but convincingly documented businesses that actually generate real profits while simultaneously serving as perfect covers for much more questionable activities. Marcus listens with steadily growing fascination as Julia describes increasingly ambitious scenarios where they could work together to influence commodity prices through carefully manufactured artificial shortages, establish entirely fictional trading companies that systematically funnel money away from established legitimate businesses, and use her family's extensive political and commercial connections to gain direct access to genuinely wealthy investors who would never normally consider associating with anyone possessing obvious criminal backgrounds or questionable reputations. The scope and sophistication of her strategic thinking genuinely impresses him. Where he has been essentially content with simple daily survival through a series of individual cons that rarely generate more than enough money for immediate needs, she clearly envisions comprehensive operations that could systematically reshape entire sectors of Roman commercial activity, while generating the kind of substantial long-term wealth that could secure their futures permanently. Their developing partnership evolves naturally as they both recognize how perfectly their respective skill sets complement each other's abilities and limitations. Marcus brings his natural charisma, highly developed theatrical capabilities, and street-smart survival instincts developed through many years of completely independent operation in consistently hostile environments. Julia contributes sophisticated business acumen, valuable social connections throughout legitimate Roman commerce, comprehensive institutional knowledge of how major transactions actually work, and the kind of genuinely strategic long-term thinking that can transform even the most ambitious dreams into entirely practical operational reality.
Their new audacious plan was to focus their combined talents on a single massive score. Their target? Gaius Cassius Maximus, a newly wealthy grain merchant whose arrogance was matched only by his desperate ambition to join Rome's elite. Julia's research had identified his desire for social status as his greatest weakness, making him the perfect mark. They staged the meeting in Julia's family warehouse, which they had transformed into a luxurious showroom for their fictional silk consortium. Playing the part of the Syrian merchant Lucius Antonius Syrianus, Marcus gave the performance of a lifetime. He wove tales of dangerous trade routes and exotic courts with such masterful conviction that Cassius's initial skepticism quickly melted away amidst the vibrant bolts of silk surrounding them. Completely captivated and convinced he had found a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Cassius didn't just accept their proposal, he insisted on increasing the investment himself. "This is precisely the kind of venture I have been seeking," he boomed, his voice full of self-importance. "I wish to contribute 75,000 denarii to this partnership to reflect my complete confidence in our shared future." The sum was staggering, enough for a lifetime. Marcus and Julia exchanged a fleeting, triumphant glance. Their mark had swallowed the bait completely.
But even as they privately savored their approaching victory, disturbing signs appeared. Their sophisticated deception was attracting exactly the kind of unwanted attention that could destroy everything. The seemingly private warehouse meeting was being observed from a concealed distance by Antonius Corvus, a rival con artist whose territory included the marketplace where Marcus had first operated. Antonius was a different and far more dangerous breed of criminal. Where Marcus relied on charisma and Julia on intelligence, Antonius had built his fearsome reputation
on intimidation and the credible threat of brutal violence. His presence was no coincidence. He had been methodically tracking their activities, growing concerned that their high-profile scheme would attract the kind of official scrutiny that endangered every illegal enterprise in the district. The inevitable confrontation came the following evening in the very same tavern where Julia and Marcus had first planned their partnership. The atmosphere, once filled with excited conspiracy, now crackled with dangerous tension. Antonius arrived with two muscular companions whose scarred faces and predatory bearing spoke of years of violent problem-solving. His opening words were cold and direct, leaving no room for negotiation. "You've been conducting unauthorized business on territory I have controlled for 5 years," he began, his voice a low growl. "More seriously, your amateur theatricals are attracting attention. The aediles are asking questions. You are a threat to established professionals like myself, who depend on maintaining a low profile."
The negotiation that followed was not about money, but power. It was a raw display of the unwritten rules governing Rome's criminal underworld. Antonius didn't just demand they abandon their scheme, he demanded substantial monetary compensation for the disruption, ongoing tribute payments to operate in his domain, and detailed information on their methods so he could upgrade his own primitive enterprises. Marcus felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was a world he understood, but not one he thrived in. He was a performer, not a brawler. But Julia remained perfectly composed. Instead of showing fear, she calmly and methodically dismantled his position. "Your territorial claims are based on criminal custom, not Roman law," she stated, her voice cutting through the tension with analytical precision. "And while your reputation for violence may intimidate petty thieves, it will offer no protection if my family's legitimate business connections decide that involving the praetor's office is the most effective way to resolve this particular dispute." A dangerous standoff developed. Antonius's thugs shifted their weight, their hands moving closer to the daggers hidden in their belts. It was a stalemate of brute force against systemic influence, and it was unclear who would blink first. The crisis that broke the impasse arrived in the form of Livia, an elderly but remarkably well-informed wine merchant whose network of informants was the best in the city. She hurried into the tavern's back room, her face etched with genuine concern. "Brutus Maximilianus, the market's chief security officer. He's not just making routine inquiries, he's been asking very specific questions about a new Eastern silk venture operating through a Roman intermediary. Someone has given him details. He is close to identifying you, Julia. This is not a casual patrol, it is a full investigation." The revelation landed like a physical blow. The air went out of the confrontation. Their internal dispute was now meaningless. An official investigation of this magnitude threatened them all equally. Antonius's face darkened as he realized that Julia's high-profile operation was indeed bringing a fire that could burn down his entire world. The territorial dispute instantly transformed into an urgent crisis of survival, forcing the bitter rivals into a desperate alliance.
"We have to move now," Marcus said, his mind racing, the actor's mask replaced by the sharp focus of a cornered survivor. "We need to collect the money from Cassius before Brutus can issue a warrant, and then we must disappear." Their escape from the closing net showcased the unique skills each of them possessed. Antonius's practical knowledge of the city's underbelly provided them with safe houses and routes of passage unseen by the vigiles. Marcus's talent for improvisation allowed him to create diversions and misdirection on the fly, and Julia's strategic mind
conceived of the final brilliant stroke that would not only secure their escape, but also ensure their pursuers were sent on a wild goose chase. It was a tense and frantic flight from the city. They moved through the pre-dawn shadows of Rome's narrow alleyways, constantly looking over their shoulders. Every distant shout, every passing patrol sent a jolt of adrenaline through them. This wasn't just a retreat, it was an active evasion, a high-stakes cat-and-mouse game against a determined investigator. As part of their plan, they executed their masterstroke. They wouldn't just disappear, they would leave a new culprit behind. Using expertly forged documents Julia had prepared, and leveraging Antonius's network to plant a rumor with a known informant, they carefully implicated two completely innocent but widely disliked merchants in their fictional silk fraud. They left a forged ledger in a satchel accidentally dropped near the Forum, knowing it would be found and turned over to Brutus. By the time Brutus took the bait and redirected his entire investigation toward these new credible suspects, the real perpetrators had collected their 75,000 denarii from a proud and unsuspecting Cassius Maximus and vanished from Rome completely.
Weeks later, in a comfortable villa overlooking the sea far to the south in Neapolis, the unlikely partners celebrated their victory. The substantial profits from their final audacious confidence game were piled on a table between them. The tension of the escape had been replaced by a feeling of triumphant relief. Marcus, Julia, and Antonius, a trickster, a strategist, and a thug, raised their cups of fine Falernian wine in a toast. They were an alliance born of pure necessity, yet they had achieved something remarkable. They had outwitted a wealthy merchant, neutralized a dangerous rival by making him a partner, and systematically manipulated an official investigation, turning the city guard into an unwitting instrument of their plan. As they laughed and divided their spoils under the warm evening sun, they understood that their success proved a fundamental truth of Rome. In its incredibly complex world, the most valuable commodity wasn't silk or gold, but the rare and powerful ability to make people believe exactly what they wanted to hear.